The high school athlete accused of stabbing and killing another high school athlete at a track meet in Texas is now out on bond. This is video of Karmelo Anthony leaving the county jail per WFAA in Dallas. A judge lowered his bond by a major amount this week. And a fundraising site has raised more than $416,000 for his legal defense, even after he allegedly told police he did it, leaving a brother to die in his twin's arms after he was allegedly stabbed in the heart. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Cases like the one that we're talking about right now get lives of their own when people use them to talk about issues like self-defense and race in America. That is exactly what's happening in the case of Karmelo Anthony, a high school sports star, now an accused murderer. A judge lowered Anthony's bond from $1 million down to $250,000 this week. This is the new video per WFAA in Dallas of Anthony walking free. He will have to wear a GPS monitor, be on house arrest, check in with the court each week, and if he doesn't do that, he'll go back into custody. We have the probable cause documents from police that lay out what officers say happened when they responded to a high school track meet in the middle of the day on April 2nd for the report of a stabbing. One officer writes that when he first made contact with Anthony and told him to put his hands in the air, Anthony allegedly said, "I was protecting myself." The officer said that Anthony then told him, quote, "He put his hands on me." And when the officer said he had the alleged suspect in custody, Anthony allegedly said, quote, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Several witnesses also came forward to tell police what they saw, and we'll dive into their accounts in just a moment. But I want to first talk about the victim in this case. His name is Austin Metcalf. Metcalf was there to compete in this track meet as well. He was a high school football star in his own right. He was a junior at Frisco's Memorial High School. He was team MVP of the football season last year, and his dad says he had a 4.0 GPA in the classroom, and he was planning on playing college football. And when you look at his social media, you could see he was serious about it. Austin posted multiple pics from recruiting trips to places like the University of Arkansas. That is a big-time Division I school. The suspect, Karmelo Anthony, he was captain of his high school's football team. That was Frisco's Centennial High School, which is just about a 14-minute drive away from where Metcalf went to school. These two schools separated by roughly 7 miles.
Karmelo Anthony, class of 2025, Centennial High School, Frisco, Texas.
This is video of Anthony mic'd up at a tournament that he linked to on his X account. On social media, Anthony shows that he was getting offers to play college football. Here are the posts from 2 Division III schools that apparently wanted him on their team. On Anthony's Huddle profile page, which is a social media platform for football players, Anthony made his bio, quote, "God has shown you the right path, just take it." Anthony's path on April 2nd led him to a confrontation with Austin Metcalf that could put him in jail for the rest of his life. So here's what we know based off what police say happened. Multiple schools were competing in this track meet that had to be delayed because of weather. If you've ever run track, typically all the schools involved have their spots around the track where they hang out between events, and in this case, where they were waiting out some weather. Austin's team apparently had a tent, and Anthony went under that tent, and somehow words were exchanged and Anthony was told to leave. In the probable cause document, witnesses say Anthony reaches into his bag and says, quote, "Touch me and see what happens." Austin then touches Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony then, according to witnesses, says, "Punch me and see what happens." Austin then grabbed Anthony again, and that is when a witness says Anthony takes a knife out and stabs Austin Metcalf in the chest. Austin then grabs his chest and calls for help. He would die in his twin brother's arms near the track. This is a Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children under the age of 21 are being diagnosed with some serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to those outcomes. Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are stepping in to help. This is a law firm with a lot of experience in fighting big corporations, and they're ready to hold food companies accountable. So, if your child or someone you know under the age of 21 has been diagnosed with one of those serious conditions like type 2 diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, head over to www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on your screen. This is what his twin told WFAA TV in the hours after all of this played out.
He's like, make me move. Austin grabbed his backpack. The kid, I tried to whip around as fast as I could, but I didn't see the stab. But then I look at my brother, and then I'm not going to talk about the rest.
Austin seemed to be very close with his family. Here's a picture of his brother with their dad. Now, as far as Anthony, police say he ditched the knife and ran before he was arrested by officers who note in their reports that Anthony was hysterically crying when arrested and asked if Metcalf would be okay. Anthony seemed to believe what happened was self-defense. Police, though, have not seen it that way. Here's the probable cause affidavit. You can see Anthony is facing a charge of murder. And initially, he was held on $1 million bond. And that gets us to the update that we are following this week after a hearing about that bond. At a court hearing, Anthony, his attorneys, their family argued that the bond was just too high, that it was unfair to be that high, that Anthony had to remain behind bars ahead of his trial, which could be months from now. A judge decided to lower Anthony's bond from $1 million to $250,000. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but this is what we're hearing about what happened. Anthony's parents testified and argued that their son is a straight-A student, that he's never been in trouble before, and he's the oldest of 4 children. He also worked 2 jobs, including currently as a cashier at a grocery store, and on top of that, he was captain of his high school's football team. According to CBS News, Anthony's attorney wanted bond lowered from $1 million to $150,000. Prosecutors didn't call witnesses at this hearing, but they said bond should stay the same because they argue that's typically where bond is set for murder cases in Collin County, Texas. Since Austin Metcalf's death, the Anthony family has been able to raise quite a bit of money for Karmelo Anthony's legal defense. This is the fundraising page on the site Give, Send, Go. It's similar to a GoFundMe, and at this point, you can see it's raised more than $416,000. This page was started by the Anthony family, and it reads, quote, "The narrative being spread is false, unjust, and harmful. As a family of faith, we are deeply grateful for all of your support during this trying period. Your prayers and assistance mean more to us now more than ever." Comments on the side of the page show people giving money and people who believe that Karmelo acted in self-defense. Give, Send, Go has become in many ways the go-to site for defendants who find themselves in interesting legal situations. It's the same site where people have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the legal defense of Luigi Mangione, the man who's accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan. Give, Send, Go is an alternative to GoFundMe because GoFundMe doesn't allow campaigns that raise money for the legal defense of those accused of violent crimes. In the past, it's been a site that's become a go-to place for people raising money for Kyle Rittenhouse and people who were arrested in connection to January 6th. Now, in this case, Anthony's father was reportedly asked during this hearing why the Anthonys haven't used the hundreds of thousands of dollars already raised to bail their son out of jail. It might be $1 million bond, but in some cases you can get a bail bondsman to cover most of it and you just have to put forward 10%. He said to that question, the site isn't a bond fund. Metcalf's family also has a fundraising site, but the money for that was used in part to lay their son to rest. Right now, that page has more than $341,000. Metcalf was laid to rest last week at a church in Frisco. The Metcalfs are encouraging people to donate money to create a scholarship on their son's behalf. Anthony's bail was lowered to $250,000, and we'll talk about why the judge did that in just a moment and why at least one defense attorney believes that was a fair decision. The court said that Anthony would have to be on house arrest, wear that electronic monitoring device, and will check in with the court each week on Fridays. According to WFAA, the judge said in the courtroom where every seat was filled that deputies provided more security than she had ever seen for a case, which is just an example of the attention that this story is receiving in Texas and beyond. Joining us now once again to talk about this case is criminal defense attorney Bridget Williams, who is based in Dallas. I know when Karmelo Anthony was first arrested, we chatted a bit about this case. Let's get to I want to start with the kind of the headline update that we've received this week, which happens to do with the bond amount going from $1 million down to $250,000. Was this a fair decision by the judge?
Well, let's start with one. I love the way that Judge Tucker phrases this. This is a bond hearing. This is not a trial setting. In my experience with Judge Tucker, she's always been extremely fair. She listens to both sides equally and gives both sides equal weight. So I think that she starts with the fact that this is a bond hearing. The purpose of a bond hearing is if we reduce this bond, will the defendant come back to court, right? What is the likelihood of them coming back to court? And if they are released, what is the likelihood of them being safe in the community? So that's the purpose of this, not necessarily to determine guilt innocence at this phase. And so I think that this was a very fair decision by the court. She took into account the what we call totality of the circumstances and what we use for every single bond hearing, the same elements every time. And then she weighs that and determines what is the correct amount. My understanding is that the defense counsel went in asking for $150,000, the state asking for $1 million. And so it's the judge's job to use judicial discretion based off all of the facts as it relates to the elements for the bond hearing, and then determine what is a proper amount to issue it, and also attach conditions as she did do in this circumstance.
And because I do think when you look at some of the chatter around any sort of bond decision, and this isn't the only case where kind of public opinion, when a bond decision comes down, has people debating on both sides. Bond, and you talked about this a little bit, it's not necessarily saying, it's not to punish someone, the point of bond. And that seems to be something that the public often thinks its purpose is supposed to be.
That's right. I mean, it's not that at all. It's not supposed to. I think this is actually one of the elements, not to be used as a object of oppression. So the purpose of it specifically only is, will this person come back to court? And if released, are they a threat to the public or to themselves? And so that's what the purpose of that bond hearing is. And so when we go back to thinking of those things, I think the judge ruled fairly in this situation, especially adding on the conditions that she did.
I want to talk a little bit about kind of what we know about this altercation that took place, because I think since the last time we talked, there's been a little bit more information that's come forward where you have Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf who are exchanging words verbally. And then at one point, Karmelo Anthony says something along the lines of touch me, see what happens, and then says punch me, see what happens. And then Austin Metcalf, according to witnesses, puts his hands on Karmelo Anthony, and that is when Anthony allegedly takes out a knife and stabs Austin Metcalf. The defense, it seems, will go down this was an act of self-defense argument as this case goes forward. How does the kind of what we know took place based off witness testimony compared to, how does that align with the law and how the law sees what self-defense is?
Yeah, the law in Texas is very clear as it relates to self-defense, and that is, am I presenting equal force to that which was presented to me? And is that reasonable, right? So reasonable force is it equal? And in this situation, it's not necessarily equal. And so that's the reason why we have discretion, we have ranges of punishment, we have trial settings, and we have mitigating circumstances. So in this particular situation, in this young man's mind, he thought that he was being threatened. He thought that he had to give self-defense in the way that he thought that he needed to provide it. However, the law is very clear. Again, am I presenting equal force, which was given to me? So if he says, well, punch me and see what happens, and this young man punches him, that doesn't give me the right to pull out a gun. That doesn't give me the right to pull out a knife. It's not equal. And so that is the conflict there of what the state and the defense are going back and forth about, or will go back and forth about. I do foresee this probably moving forward to a trial setting because of that specifically. This young man, in his mind, believed that he was defending himself. And that's the issue with sometimes with our laws when we talk about them. I've heard a lot of people say on social media, well, every person has the right to defend themselves. Yes, we do. However, that right of self-defense has to be, in fact, equal to that which was presented to you.
Is that different than, I know that self-defense laws are kind of a state-by-state basis, where there are some states where if you argue, I was afraid for my life in that moment, I did what I had to do. It seems in Texas that it's not as clear, or maybe it is more clear in how the law says it, as opposed to where if Karmelo Anthony goes into court and makes the argument, maybe Austin Metcalf was bigger than I was afraid for my life in that moment, and I was just trying to defend myself. If it's an equal force law, that doesn't seem like it could line up particularly well as a defense.
Well, that's why the defense moves forward generally with the trial setting, right? So they can bring all of those facts out in trial and give that explanation to a jury, and the jury makes the determination of, was he so inclined to believe that he was actually in fear of his life, not just from a punch, not just from a fist fight, but that this young man was so much bigger than me. He punched me, all these things. And in my mind, I was in danger of my life. And so I felt as though this was the equal force, right? That goes to a jury. And the jury then decides if that is what was necessary in order to move forward or not. And so that's why I think this will be a trial case more than likely.
I want to talk a little bit about the money that's being raised for Karmelo Anthony's defense. It's on a website that we talked about it a little bit ahead of time. Luigi Mangione, his defense is on Give, Send, Go, where they raised $200,000 plus to give to his defense. For you as a criminal defense attorney, is this something new that you're seeing, this kind of crowdfunding a defense? What do you make of this movement we're seeing in certain criminal cases where defendants are getting money from the public to pay for what is a right to have a legal defense in a case like this?
Yeah, well, one, I'll start off by saying that criminal defense teams, ones that are competent and do a good job and go above and beyond, are not cheap, right? It takes resources and finances in order to fund those things. Now, I've had clients before, and I've seen other people tell me that they have had to try sometimes to make the decision on if they want to hire an attorney, a personal attorney, or post the bond for their loved one. And in that situation, I'm always going to say hire their attorney, because then we can have the bond hearing, just as what Mr. Anthony's defense team did in this particular situation. However, using all of the resources that came from crowdfunding and all those situations, I think that it is something that I've seen more, and we've seen in cases around the country, really not just in Texas, but around the country, especially in high-profile cases, because the defense team and the resources that they need in order to put up a proper defense cost money. It's not something that just, can come by day just from doing just some specific paperwork. It takes resources. It takes a team of people to put up a proper defense.
I remember, and this is kind of on the side, just because Luigi Mangione has been the big kind of crowd-funded defense, at least within the last year, that's been receiving a lot of attention. And I remember his defense attorney initially wasn't sure whether they would accept that money. Is it controversial as a defense team to accept crowdfunding money, or for a defendant to pay for your defense with money that comes from the public?
I don't know if it's controversial. I think it's I think it's a case by case basis. It depends on, that particular defendant, depends on that particular attorney. Again, because like we stated just a moment ago, it costs money. It's not just the lawyer, but it's also their investigator. It's the staff that's working on the case. It's them taking away that time that they are working on the other cases, really to put a huge emphasis and a huge amount of their time and resources now into this particular case. That's also time away from their families. That's also time away from them doing other things as well. So just like any other job. So they are needing resources to pay that team of individuals that are going to show up and give the first class service to that person to give them the best defense possible.
Not to put you on the spot, but I mean, typically for a very competent, not saying the most, most expensive lawyer that's out there, but if someone was to pay for a criminal defense in a murder case, I mean, considering all the investigators, everything that might go into it, I mean, what typically is the price tag on something like that?
That is on the spot question, Chris. What I'll say is it depends, right? It depends. And I know that's always the answer people don't really like, but it depends on their amount of time and that they have invested into doing this. How long have they been a criminal defense attorney? How many cases have they taken on similarly to this? And how is it that they can actually put forth the effort to be the best criminal defense attorney in this particular case? So it can range. And I would say that, something along the lines of $100,000 would not be unlikely for a case of this magnitude, because we're not only giving counsel in the manner of just representation in this particular case, but also counsel in other areas as well. I think my understanding during the bond hearing is that the Anthony family now had to hire a security team. They also have to
Right.
now hire a PR team in ways that how they present to the public, because the DA's office is doing that, right? That goes into strategy. And so that is something that the criminal defense attorney is also handling. He's kind of managing all of that all together. So all of those things have to be considered. So when I say, well, it depends, it just depends on a range of factors.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of asked, not to put you on the spot, but it was more, I think people think of what an attorney might charge, but it's all those other elements that someone may not realize leading up to a trial, the amount of people that work on a case and just what the cost of that may be. To this point, cameras haven't been allowed in the courtroom. And I know the judge yesterday reportedly said something, she hadn't seen security like that deputies put around a case, perhaps in her career, or at least in a really long time. How likely is it that we would get cameras in the courtroom if this were to go to trial?
I'm not sure. I think that would just be a matter for the judge to put into effect or not. They would tell us if they would allow cameras in the courtroom. But the difference is in this bond hearing. Again, we go back to, we're talking specifically about the bond and not a trial setting. The trial setting, the judge at that point, whoever that judge is that will be ruling over it, will have the discretion to say if there will be cameras or not, based off of the safety for each of the witnesses, based off of the safety for the defendant and their families. And so I think they make that call based off of safety. Every trial setting is generally one for public viewing. It is. So if you want to walk up to the courthouse and actually sit there, that's one thing. But is it something where the court can determine, is this particular case one that needs to not be on camera or have multiple people in the actual courtroom itself, based off of the safety of all the people who are involved?
This case has received so much attention, and will continue to do so. I'm sure if it would go to trial, it would be one that would be covered on a national level. If you were on the criminal defense team for this, how do you manage that publicity? Is that something? Does the attention and the public support that Karmelo Anthony seems to have, just based off the amount of money that's been raised on this site, is that something, the attention, something that would help the defense going forward?
You're right in the fact that this has been something that has been national news, and definitely news over in Collin County, Dallas County, around the DFW Metroplex altogether. And so in order to manage that, hiring people who are good in their lane, I think that is imperative. And that's what they have done. They've hired, a great PR team and people who are able to kind of manage that and manage the public view and get out the word that, this may have been self-defense. And this is the reasons why. These are the reasons why he believed that it was self-defense. And so getting that information out to the public in a organized way is definitely something that the defense team is managing and working alongside with people who is their lane to put out information to the public. So I would say yes to the fact that it's something that they need to be doing, but they are doing it, and it's working out pretty well based off of the amount of money that he has raised.
There are many people who commit murder that never spend another day free in their lives. In this case, it appears Karmelo Anthony thought at least he was in self-defense. If he would be found guilty because the law doesn't see it that way, what type of punishment could he be looking at? And how much do the facts that surround the case of maybe it was a spur of the moment thing, he didn't mean to do it, if that's the defense's argument, what type of punishment, and I know that this is a long way away, but what type of punishment could he be looking at?
Yeah, this is a long way away, and then this is a separate phase. So you have guilt innocence phase, and then you have a punishment phase. So if found guilty, then he has a punishment phase. Murder is a first-degree felony in the state of Texas. Punishment range up to 99 years in the penitentiary, up to a $10,000 fine. However, there is a reason for ranges of punishment, and that is because we have discretion. The state, when they present their case, the judge then has the discretion on what punishment to provide. If they go to the judge, if they go to the jury for punishment, then the jury then has the discretion to determine what is the appropriate amount of years of punishment for this particular person. Now, the ranges of punishment can be anywhere, up to that 99-year time period. And so that's when all of those other mitigating circumstances come into play. He's never been in trouble before. He was a captain of the football team. He had a bright future. All these different things. That information would come up in the actual punishment phase. Not necessarily. It probably may come up in some small facets of the guilt innocence, but it would 110% be coming up in a punishment phase if it were to move forward to that point.
How long until a trial potentially?
That could be a year, that could be years. There's no statute of limitations on a murder case, so that could technically be quite some time. I have noticed that cases that are more high profile move a little faster than other cases, but we have felony cases right now who have been sitting and waiting for a trial for 6 months, 9 months, sometimes a year. So it can really just depend, based off of the multitude and volume that the district clerk's office is receiving cases in. But most of the time when there's a high profile case, it seems to move a little faster.
Yeah, we'll see how this one plays out. It's just such a sad story on so many levels, and we'll see how the legal process, where things go next. Bridget Williams, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
For On the Case presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.